The most famous missing person on the internet. While on vacation with his friends, 28-year-old Lars suffered an injury which forced him to stay behind after his buddies returned home. Only hours after they left, he began exhibiting bizarre behavior. He was terrified, paranoid, scared for his life, believing that people were after him and wanted him dead. After arriving at the airport to finally return home, Lars became so terrified that he ran out of the airport and was never seen again. Thank you so much for joining me for this week's investigation. If you have been here before for another episode, thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode of Hot in the Case. But if this is your first time joining us for an investigation, please consider following the show, subscribing on YouTube, and rate and reviewing the show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, because it helps push out these episodes and these cases to even more people. This is going to be extremely frustrating. You know those unsolved cases where there's no evidence, no leads, no clues, so anything and everything could be possible? This is one of those cases. This is the bizarre, unsolved, and unexplained disappearance of Lars Mittank. And my name is Brianna, and I'm hot on the case. This week's investigation is going to be like an old-fashioned Hot on the Case episode where we would mainly focus on the unsolved and unexplained. This is a very well-known missing persons case, but hopefully I will be able to share something with you that you might not have already known. It's completely unexplained and extremely frustrating. It's definitely one of those cases that you will not easily forget, and it will stick with you for a long time. When someone goes missing, the search for answers usually starts at the end, the moment that person went missing. But to truly understand what happened, it's important to go back to the beginning, who that person was, what they were going through in their life at the time that they disappeared. Those last few days leading up to their disappearance can often hold the key to answering how and why they vanished. Since Lars was a German citizen who disappeared in Bulgaria, a lot of the available sources for information on this case were in a language that I cannot read. And on top of that, given how infamous this case has become on the internet, there is so much conflicting information out there as well as just blatant misinformation. So like always, I did my best to find what I believe to be the most accurate information on today's case, but if you think I got something wrong, please just let me and your fellow detectives know down in the comments. Lars Mittank was the only child born to his parents on February 9th, 1986. Lars grew up in Itzehoe, a quiet little town in northern Germany. Growing up, Lars was always considered a really nice, good guy. He was popular. He always had lots of friends. He was a good student and just, like your everyday, normal, go with the flow, chill guy. Lars was a huge outdoorsman. He loved anything outside, like camping, fishing, literally you name it. He had a pretty taxing, stressful job. He was an engineer for the Wilhelmshaven power plant. He was a dedicated, loyal fan of the Werder Bremen soccer team. Even though I don't think they were particularly very good, they were still his favorite soccer team because that's where loyalty comes in. But above all else, Lars was close with his family. Lars moved away from home for his job over 90 miles away, or over 150 kilometers away from where his parents lived. But after his father suffered a stroke in 2012, Lars would commute the very long trek every single weekend so he could go back home and help his mom care for his sick dad. And on top of juggling a stressful job and caring for his sick father, he was also trying to maintain a serious relationship with his girlfriend at the time. He's only 28 years old, so this is definitely a lot going on for a very young man. He's definitely under a lot of stress at the time going into the summer of 2014. So what better time for Lars to plan a vacation with some of his close friends. On June 30th, 2014, Lars and 5 of his friends arrived in Bulgaria for a beach vacation. They were staying at the Golden Sands Resort Hotel Viva in the coastal city of Varna along the Black Sea. This was a very popular beach vacation destination spot for young Europeans. A lot of them liked to come here because it was a beautiful beach city with a lively club scene, and it was at a moderate price point. And almost all of them would stay at Hotel Viva. It was this really nice, luxurious 4-star resort right on the beach in this beautiful part of the city. The boys' trip was going great. They would spend their days sitting by the pool, lounging by the ocean, sipping on cocktails, and then they would spend their night out at different bars. Like I said, Varna had a really lively club scene. None of the other guys that Lars was on this vacation with said that he was acting anything other than just normal Lars, other than the fact that they noticed that he wasn't eating a lot. He wasn't having like big meals. He was kind of just like staying with salad and maybe some soup. But I do think this could be explained for a number of reasons. One of them being the heat. I know I don't want to sit down and have a large meal when I'm like really hot, when it's really hot outside. I also think that maybe his appetite could be suppressed because of all of his alcohol consumption. But I also think that maybe you could explain this by the fact that Lars was on a health and fitness journey at the time of his disappearance. So maybe he was still watching his weight, watching what he was eating, even while on vacation. On the 4th day of their trip, July 3rd, they spent the night into the really early morning hours of July 4th drinking at this bar. It was called the Ministries of Cocktail Bar. It was a very popular club in Varna. That night, there was a big soccer game on, so you know Lars was really into it. He really liked soccer. It was actually the World Cup quarterfinals match between Costa Rica and the Netherlands. So Lars was, of course, wearing his favorite soccer team's jersey. He's cheering on the game, watching with the rest of the soccer fans, and overall, it was an extremely fun night out. Until Lars got in an argument with 4 other men about soccer teams and which one was best. And reportedly, this argument just over sports at the bar actually got pretty heated, with one of the men actually threatening Lars. And he said something along the lines of, "Bulgaria is an easy place to find someone that would be willing to beat someone else up in exchange for a little bit of cash." But once this fight actually did end, the rest of the night was just normal and fun. Lars and his friends closed down the bar. They were actually the last to leave, leaving the bar around 4 a.m. And then while on their way back to the hotel, Lars and his friends actually walked past a McDonald's and decided to stop in and get some quick drunk food. While his friends headed inside, Lars chose to stay outside because he was not hungry at the time. But when Lars's friends got their food and went back outside to meet Lars was gone. He was missing. Thinking that maybe he just didn't want to wait for them and walk back to the hotel alone, they went to the resort and Lars was not in the room. They wait around for a while, but a while passes and then they start to get concerned. Did he get lost? Did something happen? When Lars finally busts his way into the hotel room hours later, he had quite the tale to tell his friends about what he had been up to. Lars confirmed to his friends that when they went in to get McDonald's, he didn't want to wait, so he decided to just walk back to the hotel. But on his way back to the resort, he was jumped by a group of men. They were either Bulgarians or Russians. And the attack actually left him with an injured left ear, but other than that, he was fine. He was left pretty unscathed. But reportedly, his friends didn't really believe this story at first, which I think is interesting. I wonder if Lars maybe had a history of trying to pull pranks on his friends, or maybe not always telling the truth. I'm not sure. Maybe they thought that Lars was just really, really drunk, that he didn't even know what was going on. Lars ended up sleeping it off for the rest of the night, and he was up at about noon the next day, July 4th. Lars calls his girlfriend back home in Germany to fill her in on his vacation, what him and the boys have been up to, and also the fact that he got in a fight with those guys at the bar, and then they threatened to beat him up or pay someone to beat him up. And then later that night on his walk home, He was beat up by a group of guys, and now his ear was hurting. His girlfriend was obviously concerned for her boyfriend. She wasn't there, and she urged Lars to go get his ear checked out, because an ear injury can actually be pretty serious. But Lars was hoping that maybe the injury would just heal itself over the last few days of their trip. And according to Lars's 5 friends, the rest of the trip was normal, it was fun, it was uneventful. They kept going to the beach and they kept going out to drinks at night. Lars was never scared, he was never paranoid. There were absolutely no other issues, and Lars seemed completely normal for the rest of the trip until July 7th. This was the day that the group of men were actually supposed to fly back home to Germany. But by noon that day, Lars's ear was still bothering him a lot, and he thought that it would be best to take his girlfriend's advice and get the okay from a doctor that he was good to fly. Lars saw a doctor that afternoon that confirmed he had a ruptured eardrum and suggested that he shouldn't fly home that night. Lars's friends offered to stay behind with him until he was good to travel, but Lars insisted that he was fine and insisted that his friends leave, they go back home that night and just leave him in Bulgaria. He said that he would be perfectly fine. At 8 p.m. that night, his friends took a plane back to Germany, and Lars was left behind in Bulgaria. The reservation for their nice hotel resort was up, so Lars had to find his own hotel room somewhere else. But unfortunately, a lot of the rooms were actually already booked up. Like I said, this was a popular destination for people on vacation. So after picking up the medicine for his ear that his doctor prescribed to him, these were 500 milligram tablets of the antibiotic Cefrizil. This was a very common antibiotic prescribed in Bulgaria for different infections. Lars booked a room at Hotel Colors. This was a hotel in a more shady part of Varna, and he got this room a little after 10 p.m. Within 1 hour of checking into this hotel, and within 3 hours of Lars's friends leaving the country because they left at 8 p.m., well, at 11 p.m., Lars's behavior starts to completely change. For the first time on the trip, Lars calls his mom Sandra to tell her about the fight he got into and about his ruptured eardrum. A little bit later, she calls her son back to discuss health insurance. And on that call, Lars is acting extremely strange. He's panicked, paranoid, telling his mother that there's something not right about his new hotel. There's something weird about it, that he doesn't feel safe. He thinks that he's being recorded or watched. And he asks his mother to cancel his credit cards. He calls his mother Sandra multiple times. He calls her a little bit before midnight. Again, he's still terrified, he's paranoid, he's very panicked. Without much detail, he tells his mother Sandra there's something wrong with his hotel and he needs to leave before hanging up on her. Over the course of many phone calls between Lars and his mother Sandra that night, he repeatedly tells her that he's scared, that someone was after him, and that they wanted to kill him. Lars said over and over again that there was something wrong with his hotel, there was something weird about his hotel, and that he needed to leave that hotel. And at 1 a.m., Lars actually takes his luggage and he leaves his new hotel room. He was there for all of 3 hours. It is unknown where he went and what he did after this. At 2:30 in the morning, Lars calls his mother again. This time he's whispering and he's very scared. He tells her that he had to leave his hotel and now 4 men were following him. He tells his mother that he's hiding from these 4 men. He's hiding somewhere up high, and he was afraid that he was either going to be caught or that he would fall from this high place he was hiding. He also ends up hanging up on his mother this call, but she doesn't call back because he's saying he's hiding from 4 men and she doesn't want to give away his location. At 3:06 a.m., Lars sends a text to his mother that read, "Cefzil, 500, what is it?" 9 minutes later, he sends another text message, which pretty much says the exact same thing again to his mother, and it reads, "What is Cefzil 500? These were the antibiotics that the doctor prescribed to him, so it seems like Lars is worried about the pills that he's taking. His mother, Sandra, is extremely worried and concerned for her son, and she wants him home as soon as possible. So Sandra books Lars another plane ticket home for the following day out of the Varna airport at 4:20 p.m., July 8th. This is the morning after all of Lars's behavior the night before. At 5 a.m., witnesses see Lars waving down a cab to take him to the Varna airport. The cab driver reported that Lars seemed terrified on the side of the road, frantically trying to wave down a cab. And even though this cab driver already had another passenger in his car, he decided to stop and pick up Lars because he seemed so scared. The other rider that was in the cab and the cab driver both remember the same thing, that Lars seemed terrified, and also that both of Lars's pupils were extremely dilated. Lars arrives at the airport not long later that morning, and he calls his mom to ask her to wire him some money via Western Union. Lars's mother was confused by this request because neither her or her son had ever used this method of sending money back and forth. But over the phone, Lars walks his mom through how to do this, and she sends him 500 euros. They go over his flight information on the phone call, and then Sandra asks her son to stop at the airport's medical center just to get checked out one more time to make sure that he's good to fly with his ruptured eardrum. A few moments later, Sandra calls her son Lars back up again to let him know that she made the transfer, but this time Lars is different. He is quiet, he's whispering, and she can't really make out what he's saying before Lars hangs up the call. Throughout all of this, Sandra is extremely concerned for her son. He's acting strange, he's saying that there's people after him. He's alone in an unfamiliar country all by himself, but at least she now has peace knowing that he's about to come home. He's about to get on a plane, come home to Germany, be with her, and it's all going to be over and they'll figure out what's going on. But that was the last time Sandra ever spoke to her son. Sandra would try to call Lars many more times, but he never answered the phone ever again. By 9 a.m., Lars goes into the airport medical center and is examined by Dr. Kostau. At the airport medical center, Dr. Kostau tries to give Lars more medicine, but he refuses to take any more pills. The doctor does give Lars the okay to fly, he just needs him to sign a waiver. Lars is in this medical center for about 45 minutes, maybe a little bit less, before bolting out of the medical center, leaving all of his luggage and belongings behind. Lars flees from the airport, he hops a fence, runs into a field off of a highway, and was never seen again. Sandra repeatedly tries to get a hold of her son with no success. She gets so worried that she actually calls the airport's concierge desk, and she tells the woman that picks up the phone about her son, about the situation, what's going on with him, that she's worried about him, all the weirdness, and that now she can't get a hold of him. A little bit later, the concierge desk calls Sandra back to let her know that her son fled the airport and left all of his belongings behind. When Lars never returned back for his luggage or to make his flight, when he never returned to Germany, a missing persons report was filed the very next day. In the years since, countless search and rescue operations have taken place throughout Bulgaria. His family, his friends have searched for him, for evidence, clues, leads throughout all of Europe. The power plant that Lars worked for even hired their own private detective in Varna to try and search for him. But despite all of the effort, other than a few potential sightings, no credible evidence or leads have ever emerged. Now let's quickly go over the most infamous part of this case, the CCTV footage of Lars running from the Varna airport. His mother, Sandra, was shown the entirety of this CCTV footage, but to this day, the public has only been given like a few clips of the footage. But this is what we do know about the CCTV footage, and I will play it multiple times for those watching the video version of this podcast, but for the audio listeners only, I'll explain what's going on, but I do suggest going over to YouTube or to Spotify to watch the video version as well. The CCTV footage shows Lars walking through the airport carrying his luggage. He does not appear scared or frantic. He seems very normal at this point. Before entering the airport's medical center, Lars is seen either speaking to a woman or it appears that he's looking over his shoulder. Lars enters the medical center, but unfortunately this is a blind spot in the footage. So we don't know what happens next. We don't know what happens in the medical center. But about 45 minutes later, around 10 a.m., Lars is seen running from the medical center. He books it out of the airport, running away from the airport, scaling a fence, and throughout the entire footage, no one appears to be following him. And then this is the very last confirmed image of Lars Mittank running towards a sunflower field off Highway A2. In additional footage shown only to Lars's mother Sandra says that her son Lars appears to be thinking clearly and in like a good state of mind. He appears to be moving with purpose. He's stealthy, he's staying low. He even appears to be going out of his way to avoid 2 different police cars. The question is, what was Lars running from? What would be enough to just make him get up and leave everything behind? Not just his luggage, but his entire life. Let's go over the possible theories. The first big theory in this case is that everything that Lars was experiencing, all of that fear, everything he was telling his mother was very, very real. The men that assaulted Lars on July 4th did threaten him that in Bulgaria, it is very easy to find someone that will beat you up for a little bit of money. That same night, Lars claims that a group of men that he did not know came out of nowhere and tried to beat him up. Ever since that moment, is it possible that Lars was being stalked or threatened by these men? It wasn't until his friends left the country that Lars's behavior drastically changes and he becomes fearful for his life. Maybe after his friends left and he was now left alone in this country, he was confronted and threatened. Or maybe while Lars was staying in this hotel in this more shady part of town, he saw something that he shouldn't have. Or maybe he got himself mixed up in something illegal. It's possible that he was threatened and then forced into some kind of drug trade operation, where in this case, Lars would be forced to carry some drugs in his luggage, bring them to Germany or somewhere else in Europe. Or maybe there was some kind of drop-off zone in the airport, like maybe the airport bathroom. Dr. Costow, who was the doctor that examined Lars and the last known person to ever speak with him, well, he tells a lot of different stories about that last interaction with Lars Mittank. But it is believed that after Lars got his examination and got the okay to fly, before he went to sign this waiver, he asked if he could use the bathroom and he said he would be right back. But instead of ever coming back, Lars booked it out of the medical center, booked it out of the bathroom, and left the airport and was never ever seen again. Maybe that airport bathroom was a drop-off zone. Lars either left these substances in a stall to be collected later, or maybe he handed them over to someone else, and that's why he booked it out of the airport, because he was afraid of getting caught. This would also explain why he was trying to avoid police in that extra security footage that his mom was shown. Substances would also explain why Lars's pupils were dilated the morning that he went missing. If you remember, the cab driver and the woman that he shared a cab with both remembered that Lars's pupils were huge. He had like moon eyes the morning that he disappeared. Well, there are a lot of explanations on why someone's pupils would be severely dilated other than just them taking some kind of mind-altering substance. And these explanations include fear, which we know Lars was having the time he disappeared, but also exhaustion. If you remember, Lars was still up at 3 a.m. texting his mom, and then he was seen getting in a cab at 5 a.m. 2 hours later, so it wouldn't be absurd to imagine that maybe Lars didn't get any sleep the night before he vanished. Some other people have also theorized that maybe Lars was not forced to partake in this nefarious drug trade operation, but maybe he seeked out an opportunity like this and he got in over his head, and that's why he disappeared. I personally think that this is the least likely explanation on why Lars Mattank disappeared. Lars had no history of using, abusing, or selling substances. He had no history of being a troublemaker, no criminal history at all. So I don't know why he would choose to start his life of crime in a country that he was unfamiliar with while on vacation, all by himself. There is no evidence that Lars was involved in any kind of nefarious business with the drug cartel. There were no substances found in his luggage that he left at the airport. But that's the thing, there's no evidence of anything happening. So at the end of the day, anything could have happened. It's also been theorized that maybe what happened to Lars was a part of a much larger conspiracy. The doctor that last spoke to Lars in the airport medical center, Dr. Costello, has, like I said, changed his story many times over the years. And not just like little details, he's getting them wrong here and there, like a completely different story. He's changed it multiple times. First saying that during the exam with Lars, an airport employee came into the examination room unexpectedly looking for Lars. And this is what scared Lars so much that he ran from the exam room, ran out of the airport, and went missing. But this doesn't make any sense for multiple reasons. First being, how would an airport employee know that Lars was in the medical center in the first place? His flight didn't take off until 4:20 p.m. and he was in that medical center between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. It would make absolutely no sense for an airport employee to know or even assume that Lars would be at the airport that early. Another story that Dr. Costello has told over the years, and also the one that I've personally heard the most in different retellings of this case, was that it was actually a construction worker that unexpectedly barged into the exam room that Dr. Costello was in with Lars, and that it was this construction worker that scared Lars so much that he ran from the exam room, ran from the airport, and vanished into thin air. Now, apparently there was some construction work happening at the airport at this time, so it would make sense that a construction worker would be at the airport. And I guess if Lars thought that there was someone after him, seeing a construction worker, because you don't usually think like a construction worker at the airport, but seeing a construction worker in like full gear barging into your exam room, if you think someone's after you, yeah, that makes sense that would scare you. But from what I can tell, this story also makes no sense, because the construction worker that the doctor said came into the exam room, well, that man wasn't even in the country at the time that Lars vanished. So again, very odd. And also the last story that the doctor has told was actually the story that the concierge told Lars's mother about 2 hours after Lars vanished. And this was the story that I've already told you, that Lars finished up his exam, got the okay to fly, went into the bathroom, said he would be right back, but after using the bathroom, that's when he ran from the medical center, ran from the airport, and vanished into thin air. It's really hard to understand why you would do something like this. Why would you tell multiple stories about the last time you ever saw a missing person unless you had something to hide, unless you had something to do with it? Or maybe it's possible that this doctor was paid off to change his story. Dr. Costello has no connections to Lars other than treating him at the airport medical center. He has no known motive for wanting any harm to come to Lars, and he has officially been cleared of any suspicion. But the sketchiness around him has definitely led a lot of online sleuths to theorize that maybe he is just a small part of a much larger conspiracy, like if he was paid to change his story. The second biggest theory about what happened to Lars was that he was suffering from his mental health or was possibly experiencing some kind of psychotic break. It's also been heavily theorized that Lars had some unusual bad reaction to the medicine that he was prescribed to for his ear. This is extremely possible. Lars was actually quite concerned about the medicine he was taking. You can see that in the text he sent to his mother at 3 a.m. This is a very common antibiotic used in Bulgaria for infections, for ear issues. It is apparently highly effective towards treating different infections, but there are also some possible side effects. And it is actually those side effects which apparently make it not as popular in different places in the world. It's very popular in Bulgaria, but it's not as popular in different countries. It's not popular in the United States where I'm from, and it wasn't a popular antibiotic used in Germany, like where Lars was from. And it was because of these strange side effects. And these side effects include hallucinations and drug-induced psychosis. Even though these symptoms, side effects are extremely rare, that doesn't make them impossible. And apparently, they're also more likely to happen if you pair these medicine tablets with alcohol. And we know that Lars was drinking, he was on vacation. The only thing for me that goes against this theory was that Lars was not on these pills for very long. He was prescribed this medicine and then a few hours later is already exhibiting symptoms. Now, apparently, the tablets he was prescribed was a high dose, but I still don't think it'd be likely that you take one medicine and then immediately have drug-induced psychosis. Apparently, only 3 pills were missing from his entire prescription. But it's also totally possible that maybe Lars was experiencing some other kind of more permanent psychosis or mental health struggle at the time that he vanished. The most popular theory is that he was suffering with some kind of psychotic break or was possibly in the early stages of developing schizophrenia. Schizophrenia doesn't usually pop up in males until about the age that Lars was at. He was 28 years old, and schizophrenia doesn't usually pop up in males until around like age 20 and before age 30. I read up a little bit on it, and from what I've read, those early stages in development of schizophrenia line up exactly with the behavior that Lars was exhibiting before he disappeared. Being afraid for your life, feeling like you're being followed, feeling like people are listening to you, feeling out of control, feeling weird in your environment, hearing voices, seeing things that aren't there. It makes sense to me and a lot of people that he was experiencing some kind of psychosis or psychotic break. The last few days before Lars vanished could have been a recipe for this kind of psychotic break. Lars had a very stressful life. He had a stressful job. He was also under a lot of stress in his personal life. His father was sick. He had a very stressful job throughout the week, and then every single weekend he was trekking back and forth to help care for his father, and he was doing that every single weekend for 2 years. And on top of that, he was also trying to maintain a relationship with his girlfriend while also trying to maintain a healthy social life for a guy his age. And again, he was only 28 years old. He's my age. That's so young. This is already so much stress for any person. Then he tries to go on vacation with his friends to let loose, and he's attacked by a group of men. The trauma from that alone would be insane for any person. He's injured. Now he's given medicine that maybe he had a bad reaction to. His friends leave him and go home without him, and now he's in a country all by himself, a country he's not familiar with, a country where he doesn't speak the language. Again, that would be an extremely stressful situation for any person. And you put that on top of all the stress that Lars was already dealing with. It's possible that Lars didn't vanish off the face of the earth for one single reason, but maybe it was a combination of things that resulted in this nervous break. But it is important to note that Lars had no warning signs and no history of mental illness. There was no history of mental illness, specifically no history of schizophrenia in his family. There's also a lot of people that believe that if Lars is still out there, then he has some sort of amnesia and he doesn't even know that he's a missing person. It's extremely possible that when Lars was jumped by that group of guys on the 4th of July, 4 days before he disappeared, that maybe he had a more severe injury than just a ruptured eardrum. Maybe he suffered some kind of internal severe brain injury. This could definitely explain his drastic change in behavior, his paranoia, and then some sort of amnesia if he did have that. People disregard this theory because Lars saw multiple doctors and no one diagnosed him with anything other than an eardrum injury. Over the past 11 years since Lars Mattank vanished, there have been a lot of reported but never confirmed sightings of him throughout Bulgaria, Europe, and even in Canada and South America. In December of 2016, authorities in Brazil found a homeless man that had a striking strong resemblance to Lars Mattank. This man did not have an ID on him, and he couldn't remember where he was from or even his own name. A photo of this man sleeping was shared on social media, and a lot of people agreed that they thought this looked like Lars Mattank if you took away the long hair and the beard. This could be Lars. But turns out this was not Lars, but it was actually a missing man from Canada that vanished in 2011, 3 years before Lars vanished. So even though this wasn't the answers that Lars's loved ones wanted, this was not Lars, it still gave people hope that maybe Lars could still be out there. Maybe he's living on the street, scared, and doesn't even know his own name. Doesn't even know he's Lars, that he's a missing person. It's been over 11 years since Lars Mattank vanished. No evidence has ever been found to suggest that he's either alive or not. But there's still a lot of hope that he is still out there. I really hope that everyone listening to this week's episode can take away one thing. If you go out together, you leave together, especially if drinking is involved. If you and your friends go out to a bar drinking, you and all your friends better leave there together. If you and your friends go to another country together, you all better come home together. I'm really interested to hear all your thoughts, theories, and opinions on this one. Why do you think Lars was so afraid? Why do you think he was scared for his life? Why did he run from the airport and was never seen again? What was the reason that he ran from the Varna airport that day in July 2014? And what happened to him after he ran into that flower field and was never seen again? Definitely let me know all your thoughts, theories, and opinions in the comments. Let me know if there is a theory that you have about Lars that maybe I did not share. Extremely, extremely interested to hear everyone's theories on this one. This is a case that I've known about since I think 2016, and I never stop being frustrated about this one. But that's all I have for this week's episode of On the Case. If you made it to the end, thank you so much for listening to Lars Mattank's story. If you believe that you have any information about Lars Mattank's disappearance, I will have information for you to contact in the description of this episode and on the screen now. And I will see you guys all next week when we are hot on the case once again.